Sanford Police Department. Line is being recorded. Sean.
Hey, we've had some break-ins in my neighborhood, and there's a real suspicious guy. It's Retrieve View Circle. This guy looks like he's up to no good, or he's on drugs or something. It's raining, and he's just walking around looking about.
Okay, and this guy, is he white, black, or Hispanic?
He looks black.
Did you see what he was wearing?
Yeah, a dark hoodie, like a gray hoodie, and either jeans or sweatpants and white tennis shoes. He's got his hand in his waistband. And he's a black male.
Okay. How old would you say he
He's
looked?
got a button on his shirt. Late teens.
Late teens, okay.
Something's wrong with him. These assholes, they always get away. Shit, he's running.
He's running? Which way is he running?
Down towards the other entrance of the neighborhood.
Okay. Which entrance is that he's heading towards?
The back entrance.
Are you following him?
Yeah.
Okay, we don't need you to do that.
Okay.
And tonight, new developments in the tragic case of Trayvon Martin, the teenager who was shot and killed in Florida by a neighborhood watch member.
Who was walking home from a convenience store. He had bought candy and iced tea, and then a neighborhood watch male ended up shooting him for no apparent reason.
Now, Zimmerman has not been charged by police and is now in hiding, fearing for his life.
It's incredible that this guy is not behind bars right now. It's amazing. He's not in custody. He's out there. He's free.
On February 26,
2012,
a young black male by the name of Trayvon Martin was shot by a man named George Zimmerman.
What has now become much highly talked about and discussed case.
Many people are drawing a blatant finger to the fact
that this may have been
a racist act.
This would not have been the first time something like this has happened.
For decades now, racist acts
have been documented, covered by the press, and somehow dismissed and defended in a courtroom trial, such as Emmett Till,
Oscar Grant, and now more recently, Trayvon Martin.
But then a curious part of his statement was this, quote, "At no point did I question Zimmerman about the incident that had taken place."
With over 7 different civil rights acts
passed into legislation since 1866 that prohibit discrimination of any type of ethnicity,
we began to ask the question.
Where is racism in 2012?
I was born and raised in the ghetto. I was born and raised in the ghetto. I was born and raised in the ghetto. I was born and raised in the ghetto.
Throughout this documentary,
you will see the point of view
from students to professors
on how media plays a significant role in racism
and their own personal views on the Trayvon Martin case,
and how this tragic event plays a role in society today.
As much as I'd like to say I'm completely not racist, I do find that I do tend to have little racist thoughts every now and then. And definitely, my family as well, they don't it's not, to the point where it's bad and they're, how do you say it, prejudiced against people or anything like that. But they do have certain stereotypes about people.
Stereotypes are defined as characterizations of a group that are not factual. A stereotype is a generalization to the entire group. There may be members in a group that have those characteristics, but the entire group does not have those characteristics. And so that's what makes it a stereotype, that it is not factual in terms of application to one group.
No, I definitely feel like stereotyping is a natural thing that people do. I mean, I'm guilty of it for sure, especially when you see someone that's falling into a stereotype, they're definitely acting the part, then all of a sudden, people tend to just throw the rest of the stereotypes onto them. It's like the moment you look like you fall into that area, even people who wouldn't judge you at first, if it looks that way, then they're all ready to judge you.
Let's say you're going to meet somebody for the first time and you've heard things about this person.
When I got paired up with my roommate, she's from another city where I guess to them Mexican people they see as gangbangers and all that. So they have a very negative image of them. So when she saw my last name, it's very Mexican, so she's like kind of scared, and she's like, oh, what is this girl gonna be like? She just imagined a chola with hoop earrings and all that.
Let's say you've heard things about this person and you meet them. And let's say the things that you heard about them were very negative kinds of things. Well, then you're going to respond to them differently than if you'd heard very positive things about the person, right? So how does this affect that person? If you greet them in a positive way, they probably will respond in a positive way. But if you greet them or if you don't greet them at all, or let's say that you greet them in a negative way, then they're more likely to respond in a negative way.
I feel like I've really changed her perspective on Mexicans, and but definitely I see how her growing up in that area and how they see Mexican people. I could definitely see it come out sometimes, and even in her boyfriend, he has certain, beliefs about Mexican people.
Even in superficial encounters, it can affect the person in a way that they would act differently. And they're thinking, like, the person refused to shake my hand, or the person seemed, distant, or whatever, but then they respond in a like manner to the person often.
In middle school, I had a little bit of a problem. I went to a primarily Mexican school, and some of them had a problem with me for some reason, which is kind of odd. You normally think of white people as being the racists. It's the stereotype, I guess, but it wasn't my experience.
Well, let's say that you're at like a Versatile or ATM, and let's say a black male walks up, and what does a woman do when a black male approaches? She clutches her purse. Now when she clutches her purse, he reads her body language that she has fear of him. So it upsets him, so he then says, I don't want your money, I got my own money. So they respond then in a stereotype threat situation. And what is a stereotype threat situation? It's a situation in which you have a fear of confirming the stereotype. And it wasn't so much that he planned to mug her now that she's clutched her purse, but he has anxiety because she's now cast him as some kind of a violent person or some type of a criminal.
How much of this has to do with what Trayvon Martin was wearing at the time?
How much of this has to do with the stereotypes the media puts out?
And who is responsible for all of this?
Should hoodies be banned?
To me, the arguments about the hoodie are akin to the arguments made telling women not to wear short skirts in order to avoid sexual violence. They miss the point that we should be starting out from the understanding that sexual violence and violence of all kinds is completely unacceptable, and there is no justification for it. Right? We have to start from there. So in this case, we have to think about, or what it brings up for me, is the cheapness of black male life in this society. Not only black male life, but especially, because when we see the numbers, that's the story that comes back to the extraordinary danger of vigilante masculinity in this culture, and the notion of an empowerment and a justification that goes with that masculinity. And thirdly, the ludicrous nature of our firearms legislation. The fact that when you put together these three factors, lack of respect for black maleness, vigilante masculinity valorized all the time, and the legality of weapons of destruction being made publicly available, you have a recipe for what occurred.
Trayvon represents tens of thousands of young black males, maybe even millions. Trayvon is a victim of a very racist capitalist society that maintains a group in bondage that doesn't know that it's in bondage. And then every once in a while there's leakage that is so foul that you have to pay it some attention. But every single day, black males, little boys, 5 years old, 6 years old, they're not murdered. they experience what we call menticide. They experience menticide on a daily basis. They come to school bright and eager and ready to answer questions. And then their teachers say they're hyperactive. They need to be on pharmaceuticals. They need to be on drugs. They need to be in special ed. And the parents, many of the parents are blamed. They say because they're not parenting their children. Well, first of all, the institutions of the society have perpetuated this whole facade that it's because of inadequate parenting. But when you have less than 50% of a group of young men not graduating from high school, that's a group problem and a societal problem and not an individual parent problem.
I think ever since like elementary school, that's the earliest I can recall that I experienced something as racist, you know, especially because it wasn't someone as a similar, you know, racial orientation as me, or, you know, ethnicity, I would say.
I think I began to notice racism in high school because I went to like predominantly like Latino black schools, but like we never like, oh, you're black, oh, you're this. But like in high school, I guess we started maturing, so it kind of like race started to become like, oh, you're not the same as me kind of thing, and that's when like the cliques started to form.
Nowadays, when we talk about stereotypes, we're often referring to when there is a very, very limited band indeed, a very restricted spectrum of representations of different kinds of people. One of the classic studies that talks about this in the United States, going back to the 70s and 80s, was that especially in those days, when there was a more restricted televisual environment, African Americans were overrepresented in both television news and current affairs and television drama on network TV as criminals and as victims, by contrast with their actual status criminologically in the real world as both criminals and victims involved in violent crime. And the content analysis that was undertaken over many years to show that became a very powerful tool in demonstrating the way in which stereotypes set up presumptions in the minds of viewers of the media about otherness and about self. Because of course those stereotypes not only affect the people who are represented in them, but they also affect the people who see them and who are not represented in them.
We conducted an experiment to further explore existing stereotypes.
We had our subjects dress in hoodies with their backs towards our participants.
We had them guess what gender and race the person was.
The results were quite surprising.
Yeah, exactly. So if you had to guess, what would you say, what race that person is over there?
Hispanic.
Hispanic?
Yes, like, yeah, Hispanic or African American.
Mexican. Tall. Probably Mexican, Latino. Okay, thank you.
We would be made to expect that it could be Hispanic or black, but there's so much diversity in about every ethnic group, especially from my experience around the West Coast, there's no real way of saying.
Okay.
Hispanic? I don't know, maybe black.
How's it going, sir? Basically, a quick question. We would like you to turn around and look at that person over there in the hoodie and see if you could identify whether they are male or female and what race they are.
I guess female and I don't know, maybe Hispanic.
Maybe Hispanic? Any reason why you're guessing Hispanic, or?
I don't know. I guess racial bias does sort of Hispanics with hoodies. It sounds horrible, but...
No, thank you. We appreciate honest answers. We're really looking for that.
It's the first thing that comes to mind.
We accept that.
It's not very good, but...
No, but it's an honest answer. Thank you. Amanda, turn around really quick. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir. Are you surprised by are you surprised, or?
Not really. It's like a hoodie. I can't tell
Yeah,
at all.
obviously, yeah.
Almost everyone guessed Hispanic or African American.
I'm gonna say that's the thing.
Speak over here, please.
Hi. I'm gonna say Hispanic, actually.
Okay. Any reason why?
Build and height.
Build and height. Okay. Are you interested in seeing? what they are?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, sure. Nick, can you turn around?
Nick!
Does wearing a hooded sweatshirt identify you as a threat?
Or does this really have to do with race?
This is crucial to know in 2012 because identifying someone through the clothes they wear
should not be the cause of their death.
Are Muslims who wear the hijab a threat?
Thousands of students wear hoodies with university logos on it.
Where do we draw the line?
I believe the hoodie was an extreme factor in the case, just because he was a black male wearing a hoodie. Like I said before, like it's how you present yourself in a community. And so I felt like since he was wearing that hoodie, it made it seem like he was doing something bad.
As far as the Trayvon Martin situation goes, I think we're seeking justice more or less for the justice system, but to have him in jail would satisfy people too. But the problem is the justice system. Like, had that law not been in effect, he probably would have gotten, his punishment would have been a little more brutal, and there wouldn't have been any excuses for his actions. So I feel like that law was an excuse for him to pretty much do what he felt he wanted to do, because he didn't need to do anything.
We're already getting support from athletes and entertainers as we speak. By next week, we're looking forward to getting $1 million for the capture of George Zimmerman.
And see, what people don't understand about racism, the word racism, people assume that that racists are individual people and that anybody can be a racist. That whether you're black or white or whatever color you are, you can be a racist. You really can't be a racist. Everybody can't be a racist. And I know that's hard for people to understand because they have been using racism in popular culture and in popular discussion. But in terms of the definition of racism, racism is basically the transformation of race prejudice through the institutions of the society. And these institutions, through their power, they maintain and perpetuate racism with the intentional or unintentional support of the members of the society. And so not only do they maintain it through the members who have power, but they also maintain it through people who don't have power. Because even the whole word racism, people who don't have power really believe that everybody can be a racist because they have also been told that everybody can be a racist. Yes, everybody is prejudiced. Everybody's prejudiced to something. It differs from person to person. And sometimes it's race prejudice, sometimes it's gender prejudice, sometimes it's prejudice against gay people, sometimes it's just prejudice in terms of where I live, etc. Everybody's prejudiced. Everybody's not racist. And everybody's not racist because they can't tap into that power from the institutional structure.
A lot of what I study is sort of the policy, policies that pertain to race and that perpetuate racial inequality, and many of our recent immigration policies that have been implemented at kind of state and local levels have, essentially condoned or enabled racial profiling, more at an institutional level, particularly amongst law enforcement. So, for example, police officers are increasingly called on to, essentially act as immigration officials and verify documents of people that they stop in, routine traffic stops and this sort of thing. So a couple of examples of a lot of places that have passed ordinances like this include Arizona SB 1070 and Alabama HB 56. And the effects that we've seen of both of these types of laws is heightened levels of racial profiling, not just amongst law enforcement, but also would-be employers, would-be landlords, anyone that basically comes in contact with Latinos views them, with increasing suspicion and fear that they may actually get in trouble for being associated with undocumented immigrants. And it creates a really hostile environment, to say the least, even affecting school children who In the state of Alabama, public schools are now required to check the documentation for school kids to be sure and keep track and records of which ones are documented and which ones are not. So that has certainly exposed, opened up a number of institutions to racial profiling at much higher rates.
Example. Nowadays, the highest rated television network in the United States, in probably 2 out of every 4 weeks, is Univision. It's not CNN or Fox News or BET or MTV or any of these other stations. It's not the conventional Anglo networks. It's actually a network that isn't even broadcasting in English by and large, but it might have English subtitles. Similarly, when we talk about the powerful newspapers of the day, while it's still true that the newspapers that set the agenda for news in other media forms remain the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and the Washington Post, and the others pretty much follow their news agenda. And while that news agenda continues, in my opinion, to be extremely narrow in its set of values, it's not as though the news agenda is any more set exclusively in terms of white interests. There have been all kinds of changes that have occurred to pluralize the media. For example, to give you one instance, if we look at front of camera on television news, nowadays we're going to see often a Latino, an Asian, an African American, and maybe a blonde girl wearing what looks like a negligee to me, anyway, right? As in Fox News in LA in the morning, for example. Which looks like, although it may be very sexist, some kind of spectrum of what our state, our country actually looks like. The problem is, and this is my final bit in answering your question, when we go behind the lens, when we look at the people who are producing, directing and writing news and current affairs and have the opportunity to shape the stories, there we see much less of a serious reflection of the diversity of cultures in our community. We see a much more unitary monoculture. So, if you're watching the television news in San Diego, you might see real racial diversity in the front people. But if you look at who's directing it and writing it, you're not going to. And so inevitably, that means that the array of jobs available in the media industries is restricted by race, even if there is greater diversity than before in many other ways.
They work in a very systematic way, all of the institutions in this society. And the institutions in this society work to maintain the status quo. And what is the status quo? There's a hierarchy. And there's a very small group of people on top. And there are masses of people on the bottom. The masses of people on the bottom are people of color. The people in the middle are often white, some Asians are in the middle. But the middle group of people operate to also maintain the status quo, because that's how they get their status. They're better than the people on the bottom. They're not quite as good on it as the people on the top, but they desire to be on the top, and so they help to perpetuate the system.
It seems that racism hasn't really changed much,
but maybe now it has become more discreet.
Is the race problem due to stereotypes we pass down from generation to generation?
Is it the media and how they choose to put out each race?
Or is it the government?
All of these take part in the issue that racism still does exist.
In 2012,